Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hello and welcome to episode 366 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm Rory, and today I'm joined by practitioner Lisa Williams, a Herefordshire-based psychotherapist with a strong background in academic research. Lisa holds an impressive range of qualifications, including a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in psychology, and is also a qualified counsellor and clinical supervisor. She joins us today to discuss her latest lecture for the Counsellor CPD Library, exploring how two powerful reflective tools, genograms, and something called the social graces can deepen our self-awareness as practitioners and enrich the therapeutic relationship. So with that said, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and a very warm welcome to episode 366 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly. Rory and I are going to be walking you through three topics today. Let's put the teeth back in. And we'll start with our ethical, sustainable practice, where today we're covering something brand new. It's hot off the press. You want to hear this. It's new police guidance on accessing counselling records. Now, don't jump to any conclusions. Listen carefully. We're going to dig deep into that. Then we're going to practice matters. Rory, you've already introduced Lisa Williams. So we're talking about integrating genomes and social graces, enhancing self-awareness in counselling practice. Excited for that one. And then we go into student services, where today we're speaking about what is fitness to practice. If you're already practicing, you can tick it off and check those boxes. If you're moving towards that, you can see what it entails. And we're going to be covering all things fitness to practice. But starting us off, Rory, what has happened? There's new police guidelines on accessing counselling records. I know all the ears are pricked. Every ear is listening to every word now. What are we talking about?
Well, I think before I give you the detail, I'll share a little background. So, you know, having been in practice for 20 years and knowing a lot of people in the therapeutic community, one of the things that really comes up is those who counsel clients who've been abused or raped. If that client decides that they're going to take the very brave step of reporting their abuser to the police and trying to get a legal remedy, and in some cases, making sure that person can't do to others what happened to them, and that's an important part of clients going to court, because usually in these cases, there's more than one victim. One of the things that can be incredibly off-putting is when a client says, you know, will I have to share what's been discussed in the therapy room with the authorities? And up until now, the counsellor would have had to say, I'm afraid that sometimes, or most of the time, the police will ask for the client notes. Now, client notes should be procedural. They shouldn't have opinion. They should just be, in fact, I think, very brief. They don't have to be in any great detail. But it does mean another set of eyes looks at what's been discussed in the counselling room. And, that, as well as having to make a statement and replay the trauma of what happened to them, to make a statement so that can go forward to, in England and Wales, and I'm talking about England and Wales specifically at this point, the Crown Prosecution Service, the people who decide whether to bring a prosecution, can be too much for clients, and they withdraw and they say, I just can't do it. I can't do it. This idea of my notes being read by a number of people, it's just too much. Now, I have to say here that I've worked with colleagues who work with victims of this particular crime, and they're brilliant. It isn't the police's fault, and it isn't the Crown Prosecution's fault. Those colleagues are doing their job. What it is the procedure of asking as a course of action, as a regular course of action, that we need the notes. So anytime it's ever happened with any of my clients, I've had a police officer phone say, can you send the notes? And I've asked the client if that's okay, and the client said yes, and the notes were sent. So this change of guidance in England and Wales, and we'll come to that, I think, as we go through this, is a bit of a breath of fresh air. But I think we need to be very, very clear, Ken, on what this new guidance covers, because reading the guidance, and it is draft guidance, I think that's the other thing to consider, it's a draft. It says that the new guidance applies in England and Wales, so that would not be on the face of it, we're going to come to this, Scotland, Northern Ireland, or any other country in the world where people may be working, because, of course, the legal systems are different. And it is only for specific presentations, or specific offences. So it's my understanding, Ken, and maybe you can jump in here and help me out. It is for sexual abuse and rape towards women. It's this particular piece of guidance is really shaped towards women. Would I have that right? Because I know you've done a bit of a deep dive into the weeds of this, Ken.
Well, I'm going to be reading from some of the research done, but this came into effect in January of 2026, and we're making this episode in January of 2026. It's brand new. It's hot off the press. That's why I said that. And I think that anyone listening to this, where if you feel that this is going to relate to you, Rory and I advise go and look at this yourself. We're going to put the links into the show notes so you can deep dive into this. But the new Victim Information Request Code of Practice applies specifically to police and authorized agencies who make requests for victims, and this is the big word here, victims, third-party materials. So the rules basically that those authorized personnel, and you said it correctly, Rory, would have like this system where they would just do it as a matter of course. One of the things we're going to need is any counselling notes that you have, and they would just request that, and that's incredibly invasive. And this was lobbied against, so there was lobbying against this, and this is a result of those voices being heard. So outside of the criminal context, this does not apply. So it does not apply in any other proceeding with that you would go and that they can't ask for counselling notes. So we need to really understand exactly where it applies. It was initiated from looking at violence against women and girls, because it's a massive pandemic, not just here in the UK, but throughout the world. It just is. It's a horrible, horrible thing to think about. And asking for those notes, somebody reading through your personal thoughts and feelings that you might have discussed within counselling, is just not on. So we're not lawyers. We don't take a legal stand here. Rory and I are two colleagues having this discussion. If you feel it applies, please go to our show notes page. I'm going to tell you where it is now. Go to Counselling Tutor, click on the podcast tab, click on episode 366, And within there, we'll have a download of what we've discussed today, but we're also going to give you the links to all of the documentation that we could find on this, so you can have a deeper look on that. And I guess the core facts. So the rule is effective as of January 2026. Like you said, Rory, England and Wales, and we're going to get onto that in a moment, because it becomes interesting, doesn't it? That scope might just vary. So it basically says, here's what it says: police cannot routinely request victims' counselling notes in those criminal probes. And they've given 3 words that need to be met in order to be able to request those documents and they are: it needs to be necessary, it needs to be proportionate, and it needs to be relevant. And anybody asking for those notes would have to prove that. And also, we'll get onto in a moment that not anybody can just issue that. It's the highest ranking person within the force, that within the each police, not force, but
we call them services now, police service. So it's authorized at chief inspector level. So usually it would have been detectives who would be working on a case like this. And as a consequence, the detective would be allocated the case, and as a matter of procedure would contact the therapist and ask for their notes. Now, the notes have to be, any request must be necessary, proportionate and relevant. It doesn't look like it's automatic. It means that it has to be put in front of a chief inspector for them to make a decision whether the notes should be asked for in these particular specific cases that we've outlined at the top of the podcast. So that's the big change, really. It's not a standard operating procedure to get the notes. There is now a new level of check, proportionality and balance, overseen by someone at a chief inspector at a managerial oversight level, that's where the change is.
And I'm really happy to see that, because we all know what procedures are. It's kind of, the procedure says somebody comes forward, then you do X, Y, and Z. And I think it puts an extra level of thinking within that process. So it's not just an automatic process playing out now. So why and where does it come from? And I've got a quote from Jess Phillips, who's a minister, and the quote starts as follows: "By stopping police routinely accessing counselling notes, we hope that more victims will have the confidence to come forward and help us bring more predators to justice." And therein lies the why of this, and why it is so important that we remember this is victims we're speaking about here, Rory.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes we refer to those who come to us as survivors of abuse, but really in terms of the legal parlance, they're seen as victims. And you know, as Jess Phillips, who is the Minister, I think, for Women and Girls, I think that's she's a UK minister or a English minister in the English Parliament for Women and Girls. She said on a number of occasions that you know, she's a lifelong interest has been the protection of women and girls, and she's done some evidenceable good work in that area. So I think it is welcome, and you know, anybody who doesn't get the legal remedy they wish, or to be able to protect others. And I think this is something that isn't often thought about, Ken. You know, when somebody goes to court to bring their abuser in front of a jury or in front of a judge to get justice and to see justice done, it may not only be for them. You know, in my experience, people who perpetrate this usually don't do it as a one-off. So you know, it can be, but in my experience, someone who's a perpetrator of sexual abuse or rape, you know, usually goes on to do it again. So by bringing people to court, you're also helping others. And at least in a couple of occasions in my experience, that has been one of the driving factors that has held the courage of the person making the complaint, that not only are they doing it for themselves, they're doing it for others as well. And that has really kind of propelled them into the bravery of going into the legal system. And it's not easy. It's not easy, I can tell you. And so this has to be welcome. I would say, if you're a member of a professional body, BACP, NCPS, also UKCP or any of the other professional bodies, their departments will be dissecting this very carefully. And you may find in the members area, on the outward facing pages, they will be dissecting this. And I have a bit of good news, Ken. We have a lecturer who's lectured extensively on the legal process, on note-taking, on all of this, who has agreed to come on the podcast and give us the real detail of how this is going to be applied. Irini Netanyahu, and I apologise if I've not pronounced her name correctly because of my northern vowels, has been a person who has been involved at government level, guiding the process and the policy making. And I spoke to her recently, and she's agreed to do another lecture for the CPD library on this very thing. So, I mean, that's going to be fantastic, isn't it? To have someone right at the heart of the decision making, who knows it, inside out, being able to share that information and give a informed view, as opposed to us who are effectively reading the press release and kind of talking around the subject. So that's really exciting. And if you are listening in Scotland or Wales or or Northern Ireland or some other part of the world, and they're thinking, well, this is all well and good, but it doesn't really affect me because this legislation really is for England and Wales. It might do, because if you're working online, if you're, the online world now is well established. If you're working by video or text or phone with a client in England, and you're based in Scotland or Northern Ireland or any other country in the world, the legislation or the guidance applies to the victim's location, as far as I can see, not the counsellor's. So, when this may come up in online work, and the client lives in England, you can make reference to this new guidance. So, I think that's something that we need to think about. The online world means that, of course, you can work anywhere in the world. So, it is for those of you who work online in Scotland or Northern Ireland or any of the other places. Thank you very much for listening in the world, that we know people listen. It's great. I'm delighted at the change of guidance, and anything that just brings a little bit more restorative justice and a closure to people who've been through just the worst experiences has to be welcomed.
Yeah, 100%, Rory. And we really need to take this seriously, because we are often the front line. And even if this is not your specialist area that you work in, you have no idea when a client may disclose something that would fall into this category. And if you look, it's in the past. So we're talking pre-2026. Listen to this statistic, because it's saddening. Half of rape victims withdrew from what they're calling the probe, from the process, because of the trauma that brings up. It's and the other side of this, I think there's Andrea Simon has a quote in the document that we're referencing at the moment, and it says, police will no longer routinely access rape survivors' private notes. And then it goes on to say what I think will be music to every practitioner's ears. Counselling is critical for healing trauma. And we are where trauma often comes. We are the people that get that information coming to us. So welcomed. I want to know more about it. I will certainly be hanging on to the upcoming CPD lecture, Rory, because these things are important and they're not things that we can do on the fly. There are certain parts of CPD where we really need to understand it fully to be able to make it useful for ourselves in our practice, but more importantly, to inform our clients. And so often, when you look to trauma, and of course, Rory, you're an expert in this, there can be from horrific traumas elements of shame, elements of feelings that maybe I had a part to play in this, maybe this was in some way my fault, and we've spoken about this on previous podcasts. But those are the kind of things that might be going in the notes of this person, and to have somebody looking through that, it just feels so disrespectful. So yes, welcomed, and I'm excited to hear the CPD lecture as we dive deeper into this. And I really suggest go and get the handout for this. Again, counsellingtutor.com, podcast tab, episode 366. There's no charge. It's all there, all of the links for this topic. Any final closing thoughts, Rory?
Yes, I think that this is emerging draft guidance, and almost certainly in my experience, anything that comes from government gets amended and altered. So I would say keep an eye on your professional body's announcements, contact your professional body, sign up to their mailing list, because this is the type of thing that they will be broadcasting. Their communication teams will be broadcasting that information either in members' areas, if you're a member within the members' areas, or externally. And I think that this is going to be something that they're going to be shouting about externally, because part of an ethical body's duty is to, or remit, is to inform the general public. And I would hope, and I'm sure it's going to happen, that counselling bodies will be doing press releases, will be speaking to the general public about this change, because it's the general public that needs to know about it to be confident of accessing counselling. So all in all, it was a fantastic piece of news. It cheered my day up no end, Ken.
Thank you for bringing it, Rory. I really appreciate it. And Rory and I had a chat going live today. Rory always shares the information we're going to be covering so that I can do my research on it. But Rory's there at the front line of the mine, as it were, chiseling away on a daily basis, sitting there until late hours in the evening, looking at what's happening in counselling and psychotherapy and how it might impact our practice and how we work, and then bringing those topics in service of you, our listener. And that is today's ethical, sustainable practice. And we now move on to practice matters. And Rory, you've already introduced Lisa Williams, speaking about integrating genograms and social graces, enhancing self-awareness in counselling practice. I know self-awareness is so important. Tell us a little bit more.
Yes, well, I caught up with Lisa, and she led us through the really interesting idea of using genograms, and genograms a little bit like therapeutic map making. That's the term I'm going to give it, and it's something that's been around for a long time, used a lot in social work, certainly in the medical profession, and now it's been updated to take on all the different identities that we find ourselves meeting in society. And she's done a really insightful lecture on this. I caught up with her, and this is what she had to say about it. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Lisa Williams for a powerful and insightful conversation titled Integrating Genograms and Social Graces, Enhancing Self-Awareness in Counselling Practice, a lecture that Lisa has produced for our CPD library. Lisa guides us through these two reflective tools, both genograms and social graces, and tells us how it can deepen our understanding of ourselves as practitioners and enrich the therapeutic relationship. So, Lisa, it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining us today.
Hello, Rory. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been amazing to record the lecture to bring my knowledge and skill to Counselling Tutor. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you more about it today.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So, why is personal history, identity, social positioning important? How does it shape the therapist's position?
So, it is deeply important in that our world as the therapist, as a counsellor, really impacts our work. It really comes into our work, whether we're aware of it or whether we're unaware of it. How we are as a person, how we've been shaped by our own life story really impacts how we see and show up for our clients. It also helps us to better understand our clients from our own perspective, but also from their perspective, leading into that social history, the kind of environment that they've grown up in or we've grown up in. It really helps to highlight blind spots, repeating patterns, transference, those kinds of things. So it's deeply important in the work we do as counsellors and therapists, from my view.
Yeah, and I think what you're really speaking about is kind of avoiding uncautious bias or projection.
Yeah, absolutely. And really also highlighting implicit prejudice, recognising how the social and environmental factors shape self and influence self-structure in ourselves and in our clients.
Yeah, and to do that, you use something called genograms or genograms. Can you explain, because they're very visual, these, aren't they? And we're on a radio medium, as it were, audio medium. Can you explain what a genogram is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a genogram, on first glance, looks very much like a family tree in that it displays somebody's life history over generations. So you'll have yourself depicted in that family tree style image, but also parents or caregivers, grandparents, etc. So it really looks like a family tree from a really sort of first glance. But where a genogram takes a very different stance on the family tree is that it really encompasses someone's community, social, environmental factors that also shape them. So we're not only shaped by our family structure, the generations that come before us and after us, but we're also impacted by the social and environmental factors that we live in. So school, neighbourhood, workplaces, those types of things. We interact as human beings within those spaces, and those spaces then have an impact on how we interact in the world. So like a family tree, but it goes much deeper and much broader than just a simple family tree.
Yeah, and these are figures representing maybe who you are, maybe who your relatives are, maybe how you present in the world. And from what I understand of genograms, they're like a universal language. So once one person understands what the genograms mean, someone else can look at it like a map. Really, it's a family map, and understand that as well. And as you say, we are formed by our past and our environment, and that's something, I guess, that we have to explore as therapists, usually in our own personal therapy, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to recognise, like you've said, it is very much like a map. And I also see this as an ongoing piece of work, an ongoing document. It's never completed, it's never finished. So we're going to add generations to that, or how family structures change. So divorce and separation, there's lots of symbols that help us construct that. But also in the social and environmental context, we're going to be adding images, pictures, diagrams to show a building or a space that someone occupies. And again, that really helps to show very quickly, we're looking at something very pictorial, something very graphic in front of us. We're looking at information, and we're also looking at creative ways of working. So we've got that left and right brain working and helping us understand ourselves or our clients. And it can be a really, really powerful way to help understand someone at a glance, but also take deep dives into certain aspects of the genogram too.
Yes, and it's interesting. I did some training on genograms many years ago, and the person who trained me would get white backing paper, the sort of stuff you'd use on wallpaper in your house, and she would use it to help clients map their genograms, their family trees, their relationships, and then she put it all around her practice room and walked the client around it. So they literally had a map of their lives. It felt like a very powerful exercise for both, clients and also, I guess, if we did that for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really nice way of looking at it. I almost imagine this like a roll of paper, like a scroll that you roll out onto the desk and you keep adding to it over time. And absolutely, this is powerful for understanding our clients. So some of our colleagues here at Counselling Tutor that are in training, this could be really useful for creating case studies, or if we are working with a client in practice to take a deeper dive if we're finding a stuckness in that. So working with clients at all levels of our training and practice, but absolutely creating genograms for ourselves as practitioners to help understand language that we're using repeatedly that isn't necessarily our own, or blind spots or spaces that we're not recognizing our own transference or our own implicit biases in our work, taking that to supervision and using that as a rich reflective tool to understand what we bring, how we sit within the work with the client. So it's amazing for working with a client and understanding the client, but absolutely also want to keep emphasizing for us to use as practitioners to help better understand our client work and ourselves.
Yeah, so this lecture would be ideal for maybe a practitioner who wants to use it within client work, maybe someone who might want to do some of their own kind of inquiry, their own personal development. They could use it within their own therapy. And I guess also trainers, it's the ideal, if you're a trainer, it's an ideal basis for a workshop exercise, isn't it?
Absolutely. Excellent as a workshop activity. And again, that can be two-pronged, looking at ourselves as a practitioner and how we relate to the work and what we bring to that, but also through the lens of what's happening for my client, but also excellent for supervisors as well, for supervisors to use to help their supervisees move through their work, again in their own reflection, or with one of their clients if they're stuck. So the use of genograms is endless. I don't see a way that this couldn't be used in the work that we do.
Absolutely. And genograms have been used for years and years. They've been used in social work. The medical profession used them, so I was told. So they're not a new idea. Well, perhaps they are. Perhaps they're a new idea in therapy. I've not heard it talked about so implicitly before. It's really interesting. So the lecture will teach you about that. And also, you mentioned the social graces. Now, this is a piece of theory that's been around for a little while now. And the graces, it just sounds like it's shouted. It's an acronym, isn't it? It's graces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the social graces? I don't expect you to kind of recite the acronym, but I've got it in front of me. Would it be helpful for me to kind of just go through what the acronym is?
Yeah, that'll be great. So if you give us a little flavour, and then I can talk around how this is going to be used in relation to genograms and how this is going to be presented with Counselling Tutor. So yeah, go ahead, tell us what that looks like. So
the interpretation I picked up was GRACES is a acronym, and it stands for gender, geography, race, religion, age, ability, appearance, class, culture, ethnicity, education, sexuality, spirituality, and socio-economical status. I'll take a breath there.
Yeah, there's a lot there, isn't there? And actually, what Rory will be able to see in front of him is a circle with all of those around it, and they're all in different colours, almost like a circle of rainbow. And each one of those of the social graces, so gender, religion, is depicted in the circle. So the genograms CPD that's gone out already is about the introduction to genograms. Then there's going to be a follow-on from that, which is social graces, and then how to integrate the two. So we're doing a stepped approach to this because there's a lot of information to digest. So genograms can be used separately and on their own, and the concept of social graces can also be used as a separate concept. But what I'm looking to do is integrate the two, because to me, they speak together. They work together. They are woven together. So I'm looking at now the social graces really helps us to identify what we're going to put into that genogram. So for example, religion. What are some of the religious places that someone has occupied, been involved with? What impact has that had on their life? We're adding that to the genogram. Their gender, how has their gender shown up socially, culturally within the environments that they've lived in? Did they come from a place in time or a place geographically? Geographic orientation is part of the social graces too. Has gender been a factor in that? Do they come from somewhere that men or women are prized differently? Is it some sort of religion is prized particularly in that geographic location? So I'm looking to use the social graces in this CPD work to help us feed into the genogram, to help build the genogram, because social graces looks at every aspect of the human being. So it really helps to map out what we're adding to that genogram and how we can tease out that richness that makes up the human condition in all of the colour, all of the kind of levels and information that may be able to be found there. Yeah,
so there's two specific lectures. The first one, which is available now, will be on genograms. So it's probably a great idea to get started watching that, because that will give you a new tool in your toolbox to be able to map clients' journeys or your own. And it's really interesting. I when I did my genograms training, I found it really fascinating because it gave me one very, very quick way of seeing, both myself and the client, seeing where they were in the world, what influenced them, who was closer to them, who was more distant. It was very, very visual, and you can't escape from it. Sometimes, in therapy, words can be misinterpreted, but visual imagery driven by a client's experience is massively powerful. So that was the first thing I took away from it. And the second one was, if you use genograms, it's really interesting to share in supervision. So I would take occasionally a genogram, certainly if a client had a very complex social circle or a very complex history, it was useful to just genogram it. So you could take it to your supervisor and instantly you've got a mapper Monday of a client's life. And supervision and indeed therapy took quite a different direction when it was presented like that. Is that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that using social graces in collaboration with genograms really enhances it. As I've said, you can use them separately or together, and the three parts of the CPD build on that. I've had a particular example that I can share. So one of my supervisees brought a real sense of stuckness that she was having with one of her clients. So a younger female therapist with an older male client. She's just experienced a real sense of stuckness. She couldn't quite decipher what was going on. So what we did, we'd already worked on genograms, building her own genogram, and we said, let's bring that out again and have a look. So it became really apparent that she had been, as a young person, as a child, heavily involved in a religious community that her parents were very focused on. It then became apparent that was heavily dominated by older men, and then that really helped to highlight for us that she then had a barrier of inferiority towards older men because she's a younger female therapist working with this older male client. So then we were able to have this real light bulb moment and begin to unpick what some of those barriers, issues, blind spots were for her. And then it allowed her to go back in with a whole different position and open up the work again. So that's a kind of case study in action of how this really helps to unlock things in our client work.
What other ways can practitioners use genograms? What other practical applications may they have?
Yeah, so that was a therapist, a counsellor using that in their supervision work. So, for example, using it directly with your client as well, always asking permission, as with any intervention or piece of work that we offer up. I very much see that it's born out of the work. We're not just going to charge in, I'm going to use a genogram today because I want to. It has to be born out of the work, and we seek permission from the client to do that. And with lots of my clients, I've sought that permission, brought curiosity to that, and actually helped clients to unpick a sense of stuckness for themselves, or places that they hadn't necessarily travelled within their therapy work before. So, for example, introjected values is something that really can come out of the genogram work if we're thinking about person-centred. In other modalities, that may be called something else. But introjected values is where we've taken something on and owned it as ourselves, and we keep just pushing that back out into the world again like it's part of us. So I've had clients also realise that behaviours or language use that they're using again and again, but they're not feeling okay with, they're not feeling comfortable with, or they're looking to change, realising that it's actually not theirs. It was something that was used in school by practitioners or by parents or grandparents or faith leaders, and actually unpicking that and realizing, actually, do I choose to still continue using this language or adopting this behavior, or do I want to do something different with that? So it really helps to highlight those kinds of things as well in client work.
Yeah, and in fact, the person who taught me was a Gestalt slash psychoanalyst trained in transactional analysis. And what was really useful in her work was looking at drivers, injunctions and drivers, which are broadly the same as introjected values and conditions of worth. But yeah, they can be very useful. One of the questions I wanted to ask, because many years ago, I did a YouTube introducing genograms, it's got to be about 11 or 12 years ago as of the date this is recorded. And someone wrote to me and said, have the characters been updated to reflect LGBT, gay, queer, or more contemporary people? Has there been an update in the last few years?
Yes, there absolutely has. So if we look at a traditional family tree, a female would be depicted by a circle and a male would be depicted by a square. So now, for example, a gay male would be depicted by a square with a triangle inside, and a gay female would be depicted by a circle with a triangle inside. So there are lots of updates now, but also something I emphasize in the CPD program is that there is no hard and fast rule. There's lots of information out there. So we can find lots of examples of the genogram structure, whether that's the person's family tree portion of it or the social environmental factors. There's no hard and fast rule, and there are lots of examples out there. As long as you can read your genogram and your client or your supervisor can decipher the genogram, there isn't a hard and fast rule, as I say. And what I also show in the CPD is some of my own pencil drawings to show that it doesn't have to be, an artistic piece. If you want to have some artistic flair in there, you can. But as long as you can decipher it and read it, the symbols are quite flexible and the setup is quite flexible. And I gave lots of examples in the CPD.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating area of work. As I say, from my research, originated in the medical profession and then found its way to social work and now into counselling. So, as we draw our interview to a close, people who watch this interview, so the first one is going to be integrating genograms, and then you're going to be doing another one on social graces. So the first lecture, integrating genograms, which is available now, what would you hope that the people who watched it would take away from your lecture?
So people that have already have an awareness of genograms would have an inclination to move back into that work and find different ways of using it within their work to enhance their work. People that have never been introduced to it before would find this a really amazing tool and will be able to begin using it. They'd have a better understanding of what a genogram is, some of the theories that are linked to that, and absolutely some examples. I gave 2 case study examples within the lecture, and also lots of examples of how to begin a genogram. So by the end of the lecture, some really great ideas around the theory, the application, and also the construction of a genogram. So realistically, it can be a standalone lecture and you can go away and use genograms following that.
Fantastic. So integrating genograms, the first part of a 2-lecture series, which includes social graces and enhancing self-awareness in counselling practice, is available now in the Counselling CPD library. It just remains for me to say, Lisa Williams, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rory. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to moving on with the social graces work as well.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com. Massive thank you to Lisa Williams. Massive thank you to you, Rory, for holding those all important and interesting discussions. And that was today's Practice Matters. We go head first now into student services with a topic that I think is going to be of great interest, whether you're a student or if you're qualified as well, because we're speaking about what is fitness to practice. Now, as a placement therapist, I guess, as a student, you're going to get a fitness to practice letter at some stage. But what is fitness to practice, and why are those barriers there, I guess, Rory?
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Well, I think if we look at this initially through the student's experience, Ken, fitness to practice is a kind of unspoken covenant that training providers and placement providers have. So what we have to remember is when you as a student turns up for your placement interview, they really only have the interview and how you present as evidence of whether they would like you to join their counselling team as a student. So what usually happens is that the tutor sends what's called a fitness to practice letter. And a fitness to practice letter is sometimes referred to as a letter of comfort. In other words, that letter carries with it the approval for some, approval's probably not the right word, but the professional view, that's better. The professional view of the tutor, of the student, that they are at a place where they're ready to engage in client work at student level. And that letter is gained through observation and reflection of the students by the tutor. So it's not unusual when we practiced teaching, Ken, for us to have fitness to practice weeks where we would ask a student to do a mock counselling skills session, and we would take a view on whether they were in a position to confidently be able to engage in client work. You know, their skills were at a level and their understanding of theory and then personally, their own personal development was at a level that allowed them to engage. And the thing with the fitness to practice letter, it is a living document. So that fitness to practice letter is only active as long as the person is fit to practice. They can be withdrawn in exceptional circumstances, Ken.
Yes, and they do get withdrawn, and they also get refused, and for very good reason. So I think you've beautifully outlined what it is, Rory. What is a fitness to practice? Fitness to practice is not that you know all the theory and that you can ace all the assignments. And you may find a student that gets refused their fitness to practice letter, even though they're getting straight A's on their assignment. It's nothing to do with that. Well, I mean, that's part of it. You do need to understand the theory. But the tutor is somebody that a student will spend quite a lot of time with. And within that time, your character is going to show who you are, how you show up from a personal development point of view. Your skills are going to be observed, as well as your understanding of the theory. And only when that tutor is 100% confident that when you go out into practice, you're at the very least not going to cause harm. And that might be quite surprising to say, at the very least, not going to cause harm. But, you're going out and you're starting on that journey that it is right for you as the placement practitioner, but it is also right for the clients that you may see. And you're 100%, Rory. You can present beautifully in an interview for a placement. They can really like you. You can be a really likable person. You can have done great research on the organization and impress them. But it's in the room when the door is closed and you're there with that client that it actually, that's where it all takes place, Rory. And personal development is a part of that. Skills is a part of that. So what are some of the reasons that a fitness to practice may be rejected or delayed? And I'm going to say delayed here. And how should a student feel? And I say this because we have a Facebook group and it's got over 50,000 people in. There's loads of discussion, and this comes up from time to time. It's kind of an evergreen. It turns around and around, and you'll have a really demoralized student going in and saying, I didn't get my fitness to practice letter, and I feel absolutely devastated. What's your thoughts and feedback for those people?
Yes, well, as a tutor, it's never easy to say to a student, I think what we need to do is see you again in a month, which is what we used to say, and we used to give very, very positive feedback, developmental feedback, not that kind of sandwich feedback where you start off with something that's, good, then you talk about what wasn't good, and then you talk about what is good so they don't feel as bad. I don't feel that's useful. It's usually called a poo sandwich. Am I allowed to say poo sandwich on the podcast? Probably. Poo sandwich. I'll be polite. Poo sandwich feedback. Developmental feedback is where you say, look, this was good. What you need to do is develop this area. And it's about development. I think that when we issued Fitness to Practice, we would give people a developmental feedback. And sometimes we'd do that in writing. And we would say, okay, come and see us again in a month. And it can be devastating. It can be upsetting when someone comes back and they say to their peers, well, how did it go? Well, I've got to see them again in a month. And I think that, I think that's how it's framed. We used to say that fitness to practice, if we're doing a fitness to practice observation, not everybody may pass the first time. That is quite normal. It's nothing to worry about, and people will be reassessed. And I think in all the time we taught, Ken, I think I only withdrew a fitness to practice, or someone didn't make it in one occasion. And most everybody actually passes. And sometimes it's nerves. It's the big event. It's the driving test, if you like, of counselling training. You're in front of your examiner, and some people just buckle under the pressure. And I think, you say to them, okay, I can see you struggled a bit there. Don't worry about it. Just continue with your skills. And I think what we used to do, or you, because you were the skills instructor. I think from memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you might just set the students some kind of program, or you might just observe them a little bit more in between that month's gap, and kind of reinforce and reflect to them the change, and then they would come back, and usually they'd come back and it would be completely different. And they probably know us a little better as well as tutors, so they weren't as nervous. And it's really important to realise that it's the professional view of the tutor to the placement. The placement's reputation relies on an external view. You know, that's the thing. If you're running a placement and you get someone who is just unsuitable to be a counsellor, that impacts on the placement.
Yeah.
So this fitness to practice is, as I say, it's a letter of comfort. It means that someone looks at that and thinks, I've interviewed the person, and also we've got this letter, and the two things match up. So we'll offer them a placement. But what I would say is, if you've just recently not passed your fitness to practice, or you're going to go and do it, just don't overthink it. If you don't pass, you get another go. It's not like a driving test where they charge you a fortune. you know.
I was thinking that. Yeah, you don't have to pay again.
You know, yeah, we should have done that. We should have charged them £70 a pop. But no, you know, you're in a supportive environment. And if it's any consolation, I seem to remember that I got back trooped in my course, and back trooped is a kind of military term. In other words, I had to go through the training again, and I was very glad of it, because when I got to the point of fitness to practice, I was just so much more competent.
Yeah.
You know, and knowing that. And the other thing about the fitness to practice letter, Ken, is that it boosts your you're given a letter by your tutor saying, yeah, you're good to go at the level that you're going into. You could do this.
You can do this. I think it's so helpful, Rory, that you just said that you remember that you maybe you didn't get your fitness to practice letter first time around. And I tell you, I think that there's a lot of listeners that know who you are. You are now, and have been for over a decade now, the academic lead in Counselling Tutor. And, you know, there's reassurance. And if you think about, I love the fact that you brought driver's license into this, because I think if you look at it in terms of a driver's license, how many people don't get a driver's license that first time? My daughter's boyfriend has been around that wheel a few times. I can say he's got it now. And it was a little bit like, oh no, when that happened. Then there was a time of waiting and then going back in, and usually you're given feedback of what you can improve on. But it doesn't mean, if you fail your driver's license, that you're a terrible driver and you should never be on the roads. And the same is true for counselling. It doesn't mean you're not a good counsellor. If you don't get it that first time, it just means there's some areas that you should be looking at and tweaking. And there is an accountability. There's many layers of accountability in counselling and psychotherapy here in the United Kingdom. And that one of those levels of accountability is a tutor. The tutor, if something does go terribly wrong within practice and somebody signed off a fitness to practice letter, they may be looking to the tutor. And I guess that's a strong message to the tutors. You're doing a great job in doing that. It might not be nice. And I know when we were doing it, Rory, that's not what you want to do. You know, you don't want to say, you know what, no, you're not ready now. You need to come back in a month and you need to look at these areas. You feel like the baddie in the situation, but you're not being the baddie in the situation. You're guarding the profession. And if you look to your ethical framework, we're called on to guard the profession. You've got a supervisor, and when you go into placement and you go to your first meeting with your supervisor, guess what they're going to ask you for? Your fitness to practice letter. They're going to say, where is it? If I'm going to oversee your practice, where's your fitness to practice letter? And of course, your insurance and your ethical body membership and all of that will be asked for. But it's one of the... It's a rite of passage, Rory, getting that fitness to practice.
I would say, and I know what we used to do, Ken. We used to have a presentation of fitness to practice letters. Yeah. So when people passed, we'd have a letter printed out, and then we would call someone and say, "Got your fitness to practice letter," and it was a rite of passage and the beginning of professional formation. It was a line in the sand where a student could say, I'm now at the point of being able to engage in the work. And I think that symbolically those letters build confidence. Once someone's got a fitness to practice letter, their shoulders are a bit straighter, their backs are a bit straighter, usually have a beaming smile on the face. They feel more confident, they feel more replete in the work. And, you know, they're ready, they're carrying, I guess, that knowledge that someone else has said you're good to go. And I think that's a great thing, because they're going to be working with clients and just carrying that kind of transitional knowledge just aids confidence. So it can be devastating when you don't pass. However, when you do pass, it really does boost your confidence. So we do commiserate with people who have to go through. It's nerve-wracking.
Yep, it is.
It's nerve-wracking. You're under a lot of pressure because your tutors are there, even though they're there in a very supportive way. And also, what I would say is, if you are doing a fitness to practice and you get to choose your peer carefully. I've had some that have, shall we say, made the road a very difficult one to drive along in terms of the driving test analogy. So find somebody who, is going to engage with you. I've seen a few where, how shall I say this in a charitable way? I think they may be having a really bad day, and it was very difficult for someone to shine when you're not getting anything back. So choose your peer carefully. But good luck.
Yes.
If you are doing it, and if you're doing it this week, and you may be listening to this in your earbuds, and then you're going into college or uni to do your fitness to practice, just go for it. Be the best you can be, and enjoy the experience.
Yes. And kind of as we led into this, the topic is, what is fitness to practice? And it's more than just an observed skill session to make sure you can use the skills. It is a holistic overview of you by your tutor, your understanding of theory, your understanding of the ethics and how to work within the boundaries, the way that you apply your specific modality. So an example might be if it's a person-centered modality, that you are looking through the other's frame of reference, or trying to, as opposed to always being in your own. It is a holistic overview that kind of has a little bit of a driving test element to it, which is usually an observed skill session, and those things remain true no matter how long you're in practice. And Rory, you mentioned the fitness to practice letter can be pulled, and it can be. So if there's a complaint, or from the supervisor, or from the placement, or the student comes and shares something in professional discussion where a concern is raised, it can be pulled. And I think this reflects what it's like to be a qualified counsellor, because your practice, your supervisor at any stage can say, you know what, I think you need to step out of practice right now for a time. It reflects what is fitness to practice. So I think I see fitness to practice as more than just that driving test. It's like saying that once you've done your driving test, you don't have to follow the rules of the road anymore. And you will develop your own style, I guess, as you go forward. And for those, I think it's timeous that you brought this, Rory, because I know a lot of students are working up to that fitness to practice at the moment. And if you do get disappointed in it, here's the thing. If you've got a driver's license and maybe you had to do that test more than one time, all you remember is that you've got a driver's license now and you can drive. You don't sit there remembering, I didn't get through the first time. Once you've got it, and you're through, and then you're going. And to keep the driving analogy alive, Rory, your license for driving can be taken away as well. It's just the way it is. As soon as you become unfit for practice, you can be removed from it at any stage, not just as a student. What a great topic, Rory.
It is a great topic, and I think it just, if there's any members of the public listening, I think it brings really reassurance into the checks and balances that are built in to practitioner training. And yes, you are correct. In some cases, I think in one case I contacted the student and said, look, you're going through a difficult time. You need to stand back. It wasn't received very well, I have to say, but people are going through a difficult time often don't receive very well in cases like this. And I said, we're going to have to withdraw your fitness to practice. And I had a long conversation with the practice manager at the agency and explained in broad brush strokes what was happening, that we'd regretfully have to withdraw the fitness to practice letter. And the end of that story was that the storm for this person passed. We re-looked at the fitness to practice. This may be before you talked with me, Ken. And then we reissued it, and they went back to their agency. They had a little interview, and then they went on to continue the studies, and they went on to pass. It is part of the ethical underpin of our profession, and I, for one, am glad it exists.
As am I, Rory. And I'm glad that you brought the topic into student services. And this has been episode 366 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
We started with ethical and sustainable practice, new police guidance on accessing counselling records, a detailed deep dive into a very intricate change in guidance on the police accessing records. And as I say, as we said in the podcast, there is a handout with some detail in there. If you go to counsellingtutor.com, podcast tab, episode 366, you'll find that handout. I also would be thoughtful of looking out for announcements from ethical bodies and also any other information that comes up. This is a draft guidance, so there's a bit of a distance to go, but I think that the spirit behind this is very, very welcome and will support vulnerable clients who want to get legal remedy. Practice Matters, straight into that. Interview with Lisa Williams. Talk about genograms and social graces, different ways of understanding clients' journeys and communicating with clients, and also that enhances our self-awareness. It's a lecture in the CPD library, and Lisa told us all about the lecture and also about the spirit and the information in that particular lecture. And then student services, Ken and myself went on to discuss fitness to practice. What is fitness to practice? How it affects therapists at different stages of their career, and why it's important to have fitness to practice, and indeed, as a student, a fitness to practice letter. I'll take a breath there before I say thank you. Take a breath there before I say thank you for your likes and subscribes and your shares. They mean the world to me and Ken. And until we meet again, as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.